You're listening today to The Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer, and I talk with authors, artists, and entertainers. Hope you enjoy the show, and please check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/Adam Messer or on www.theadammessershow.com. All right, and welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. This is the Adam Messer Show, and this is the second hour that I have the pleasure of being able to speak with the folks from the House of Stitched magazine, Lisa Vasquez and Donelle Pardee Whiting. So welcome back, ladies. Thank you for being here with me for the second hour of the show today.
Thank you for having us.
So the first hour we were talking, y'all, and if you missed any part of it, don't worry about it. You can go back on and listen to the podcast, Adam Messer on YouTube or the Adam Messer Show on all your favorite podcast places. But I'm saying that because we had a lot of good stuff. We were talking about publishing. We were talking about the magazine. We were talking about the benefits of working with independent publishers and small print publishing. The benefit, like you were saying, Donelle, at the end of the hour, that you were in journalism, you went to school for journalism, and now you get to mesh your skill sets with this publication, and it's a dream come true for you. And I think that's wonderful, and Lisa, with you, with your publishing background and experience, and I think it's really cool because you think about it, and like I said, then I want to share with y'all like how I got into journalism, because this month is my 7th year of publishing as a journalist, as a published journalist with the Savannah Morning News. So I feel like it's pretty cool. I really like it. So here's a little background. When I was in high school, I took I switched schools my junior year, and I took journalism 1 because I always enjoyed writing, I enjoyed reading, I enjoyed literature, I enjoyed English, and I took journalism as just another writing class. So journalism 1 was junior year. You had to take that in order to do journalism 2, which was the newspaper staff. It was not a hard class at all. We learned the basics of journalism. We didn't do that well as far as publishing. We published 4 issues of the newspaper for the year. We had 12 kids in the class, and we just most of the folks in the class were just not go-getters, and they didn't really care about publishing. So we only put like 4 newspapers out. But I was the front page editor, and I wrote articles. I did the editing for the front page, and I also did. We didn't do political cartoons, but they were like those political cartoons. I would draw them, and my friend Vince and I, we'd do the dialogue and whatever for it. Anyway,
cool.
Fast forward to 2014. So this is 1994 when I graduated high school. So 93, 94 is when I was doing this, when I did the journalism classes or whatever. Fast forward to 2014, I graduated with my undergrad and my master's, and loved writing, still loved writing, but most of my writing was academic and business, not journalism. So I had a very stressful time at the job that I was in. There were a lot of things going on, and I looked at doing something artistic and creative as an outlet. And a friend of mine had they were a photographer, and I'd always liked doing photography. I was like, oh, this is so cool, So I joined the Savannah Morning News as a volunteer with this thing called Spotted. And you would go to these events around town, and you would take photos, and then you publish them online, and people loved it. I mean, just went crazy for this. I had almost 20 million hits on my photos for this throughout the time that I did it.
That's fantastic.
One of them had almost 1 million hits. This is before, I'm just going to say this is really before, a lot of the social media stuff kind of blew up with it,
Right.
But anyway, I went back to my days of writing in the high school. And we had like a little get together party, and the paper loved it. They loved all the hits and stuff like that because it drove a lot of traffic and whatever. And people just talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And around Savannah, it was a very big deal. People really enjoyed it, and there've been some other, since we've not really done the Spotted. We still have it, but it's not like what it was, and I don't do it anymore. But there are other media companies that have done their own version of Spotted. And it's wildly popular. I mean, like wildly popular. Just imagine socialite events, and you've got a runway with paparazzi photography type thing. Like mini Hollywood in Savannah type thing. Anyway, I was one of the more popular photographers, and we all had these different different styles or whatever, and they would do like these little parties for us. And they throw this little party, and we get gathering, and they'd say, thank you very much for yada yada yada, and they do like this little party or whatever. But anyway, one of the editors for the Do Savannah, which was an entertainment magazine, her name was Heather Henley, and she was at this party, and I was like, hey, I used to write in high school, and I would like to maybe write for the Do Savannah or whatever. And she was really nice and polite, and she was like, yeah, just send me a sample of your writing or whatever. And it's just kind of like a polite no, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I was like, oh, okay. So I just took it like that. I was like, oh, whatever. I didn't really worry about it. I just kept doing the Spotted. And what I kept doing though was the slugs for the photos. I would write these little paragraphs, just like a little blurb, slug, they're kind of whatever. And there was a business that was going to open up called Savannah Lion Gamers, or Savannah Lion Games. And it was one of those new tabletop places where people would play these new tabletop games or whatever. And I went by and I was like, hey, I said, I could do a photo session, and these are all the hits that I get and whatever. I said, but I really would like to write an article, but I can't promise you that it'll get published. And the guy's like, well, that's cool, no big deal. He's excited about it. Jeremy was his name, and real friendly guy. And so went out there, did the photos or whatever. I wrote this article, just a very simple style article like they did for the Do Savannah with the entertainment. Just very, very simple. And I submitted it. I said, hey, I just would like to see if you could use this article. And she was like, this is perfect. And then, she published it. But I also got an assignment like the same week to write about, we had a couple of people here in Savannah who were going to be judges for a costume contest, a Dragon Con. And so I wrote that article after I wrote the first one, but it was published before the first one. And it was within the same week, but one came out one day, and the other one came out the other day. So I started writing for the paper, and I would write, my column was about like just geeky stuff around town. It's called Geek Fringe. And then, I kind of expanded it into more of my art stuff that I like, creative stuff. And so since then I've written several hundred articles. I've interviewed a lot of different people, celebrities, to your average run-of-the-mill people like me, just your everyday Joe. And right. One of the things that I really like about that, and when you're talking about doing your magazine, is that being able to take those skills and merge them together. The radio show, I do a casual conversation because there are so many Q&A style shows out there. And then with the podcasts and stuff, there's so many, there's like a bazillion podcasts out there, the thing that I try to do is I try to connect with people, build relationships, and just have a casual conversation, long form, or whatever you want to call it. And we get to talk about stuff where, there's no agenda, right?
Those are the best kind.
Right. And we just talk about, whatever. And, we sometimes, like this is the second time, Lisa, you've been on here, and we can pick up from where we were talking the last time about stuff,
Right.
And so I thought, I when you were talking about like you're getting to use your journalism skills with this magazine, I know exactly how you feel, and I felt the same way. I still feel the same way. I feel it's an honor for me to be able to, and the privilege of being able to talk with people and interview them and share their story. And I'll give you a perfect summary of this is exactly how I feel, and this is a great example of the best way I could put it. This week, the article that was published was about my good friends Terry and Darlene Dremel, who they created. Terry created this comic book called Sea Range Comics. He had never published it before, and his wife Darlene said, "Hey, let's make this a thing. Let's publish this." Now they're on episode or issue 12 and working on 13, right? Terry does the artwork. They work on publishing it. They go out and they distribute it and all this. So I had pitched it to my editor. I said, "Hey, I'd like to write about them, write about this comic book and then Savannah and whatever." And so I never share the articles with the folks beforehand, so they get to see the finished product, right? They get to see the edited and finished product. And so one of the things that really tickled me was that Terry and Darlene, they were just so overwhelmed with the article, and it was basically just written up. I wrote it up about the things that we talked about and whatever, and they were getting a lot of feedback, good feedback from people that they know, and that were reading the article about them and Sea Range Comics and stuff like that. Excuse me. And we were talking, and I told him something that, like when I would do photography, people would say, "Oh, people love your photo. People just love your photo. They keep going on and on and on about the photo." And they were saying the same thing about the article. Like, people just love this article, and I was like, that's the cool thing about it. People love you, and they want to read about you, and they want to see pictures of you, and so for me, when I'm able to express that and share that story, and it highlights them in a really great way that people are like, "Oh, wow, whatever," then I've done my job. They're not saying, "Hey, I like Adam Messer's article about you." They're saying, "Hey, I love that, article about you." It's one of those things where, like, I don't want to be in the spotlight of the person I'm talking with or interviewing. I want them to be in the spotlight. And so when you're talking about that, like you felt like you've arrived with your journalism and stuff, it's the same thing. Like, people are like, they will notice it if there's like problems with the errors and issues and stuff like that. They'll say, "Who edited this?"
Will notice that so fast.
But if you've done your job well, they probably won't ever notice who edited it unless they're really into that kind of thing. And I feel like that is almost a testimony in itself, because they're not looking at like, "Oh, well, you left that semicolon there and it should have been a comma." You know what I mean? And
I do that though.
well, you get what I'm saying. Like, when you were talking about like that, I felt the same.
Yeah.
I still feel that same way. I feel like it's such an honor to be able to talk with people, and it's such an honor to be able to share their story. And and right now I'm able to even share my story talking with y'all, because we're talking about the same kind of things. And
What's funny?
go ahead. Yeah.
What's funny is when you started saying how you got into journalism by taking that class in English your junior year of high school.
Yeah, I took journalism 1 and 2 in high school. Yeah.
My junior year of high school, I was looking for a class and I was allowed to take electives, so I picked journalism. And our teacher would send out. We interviewed our classmates, so we teamed up and we interviewed a classmate, and she sent out the best ones to the local newspaper where I lived, where I grew up, and mine got printed.
Oh, wow.
So it's the first time I saw my name in print, and I'm like, "Oh, wow, I did that. And I got all excited. So I joined the staff of my school newspaper my senior year. And then I went and got my degree, and I worked at various newspapers. And along the way, I had to pick up, part of getting the journalism degree was to take a photography class. And I fell in love with that. So all the papers I've worked for, I had to take my own photos.
Yeah, I've done a lot of that too. Yeah.
We didn't have a staff photographer, like, "Oh, you get this photographer to do it." You did it. And my last stint was the editor of my local paper where I'm at now. where I live now, and for a few years. And so that was it. I wrote everything and I laid it out, and I had to go out and take photos. And I still enjoy looking and talking to people and taking photos. And one of the things that you said about the Q&A, and Lisa and I talked about this, is I don't like Q&A style articles. Now, you'll notice in our magazine, we will have occasionally, we'll have a Q&A style, but we don't do question, answer, because I don't talk to people that way. It's like you said, I like to sit down and have a conversation. So right out of the gate, I'm like, it's casual. Just we're having coffee and we're chatting about stuff. And then from there, I pull everything together, and you will shine brighter than the sun, if I can have any say in that.
And you're listening to WRULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Sonics Community Radio with Global Soul. I think that's wonderful. I think it's really cool. And, it's weird because I get like 500 words copy space for my articles. And so I will do a rotation. Sometimes I will do an expository style article. Sometimes I'll do like an introduction paragraph in a Q&A.
Right.
But this one I did as just an overall. And I'll tell you, this is like my little secret for anybody out there listening that you want to get into writing blogs or articles. It's the same kind of thing. I will not call somebody and do the interview the first time I've ever talked to them. I won't. I just period will not do that. I will call them unless they're like a person like I had to interview the current heavyweight champion of the WWE one time, and it was a 7-minute guided call with a person on there. So I'll do that. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, what I'll do is I'll chit chat with somebody. I'll say, hey, I just want to get to know you a little bit better, and I want to get to know, talk to you about what you're working on, and that kind of thing a little bit better. And then what I'll do is I will informally chit chat with them and informally do an interview, but not an interview. You know what I mean? I'll ask like open-ended questions where I'm trying to learn more about what they're talking about. Because sometimes you get a press release, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get like an email, sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's a Facebook event, or sometimes there's not. Whatever. But I'll talk to them. I'll try to get to know them a little bit better. I'll try to familiarize myself with what they're doing and that kind of thing. And then what I'll say is like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send you an email with about 7 questions. And then you can think about your answers. That way it's not a sound bite. And you can really have a chance to express, how, what you want to talk about. And I always focus on the person, not the event that I'm writing about. I always focus on the person. And it works out really well because it puts the person at ease and they're not on, edge. And then, I get a lot better, response from them when it comes to like I could listen to you all day long, but I can't tell you what the House of Stitch magazine is exactly about the same way you could. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I can kind of regurgitate stuff, and I could tell people like, oh, it's a really cool magazine, but I'm still it's never going to be my baby. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I found that's worked for me, especially with having a smaller copy space. 500 words, people, that sometimes can be like a world, and a universe. And sometimes it's like just, barely, a drop in a bucket, So I don't know. That's one of the things that's really the reason why I thought your magazine was so cool, because I was like, oh yeah, this is the same style that I'm doing and have been doing, and you're doing it, and then it's been taken off, and it's really cool.
Well, you're always welcome to come write an article for us, just so you know.
Definitely.
Well,
I'll take you up on that offer. I wasn't setting this all up to get a gig, but I'll take it.
Oh, wait. You weren't. But I have to ask you. So we're going to go into, if you were to submit an article, how well do you work and play when it comes to the editing, working with an editor?
Oh, I have a good answer.
I have a nickname.
I have a good answer for you.
Reason.
Yeah, you have a nickname. What's your nickname? And
They
I'll tell
call
you my
me Dragon.
response. They call you Dragon?
They call me Dragon.
Well, do you
Dragonelle.
must like
Dragonelle,
you
actually.
must you must like a lot of
Dragonelle.
gold.
No words.
Because
I will also go scorched earth on a piece if it needs a lot of work.
well, you
I
should.
will bleed all over it.
You should. You should. But if you
I don't back down easily.
if you come to the battlefield, you got to be prepared to be slayed too.
This is true. I will back down if I can be proven wrong.
I'm just using that.
Prove me wrong.
I'm just using that.
I will admit it if I make a mistake.
No,
If
see, that's the thing too. Like when you're working with an editor, if you have a good, even if you have a good working relationship, you don't necessarily have to be friends with somebody, but if you have a good working relationship, and I'll give you the same example that Lisa and I were talking about. I had an editor one time that changed my voice from active to passive.
No.
Yeah, didn't tell me until
Did not.
after. I didn't even tell me that. I found out after I looked at the article online, and I said I messaged the editor. And I said, "Why did you change my, voice from active to passive?" And he said because that it read better for the audience. And I was like, I don't write like that. I said, don't ever change my.
No, passive never reads better.
Well, I think the bigger issue is that he changed it without talking to you first.
Yes.
Well, that and
That's not okay.
And so, but this is the thing too. Like when sometimes, like especially when you write it for the newspaper, sometimes you write something and the editor's going to make a change that enhances it.
Allowable.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is like there's some changes that they're going to make and it's going to improve it, and you don't. It's not an approval process with it. It's like it's the editing process.
The bad part about journalism is you're pretty much at the mercy of whoever edits it.
Yeah, and so when you have a good working relationship, like my editor now, I have a great working relationship with, and my first editor I had a great working relationship with, and I've had other editors where I've had good working relationships. But when you have a person who so everything I do when I'm writing is for my reader. I'm writing for my reader, and I'm writing because it's for them. It's not for me. It's for them. And when I keep that in mind, with the editing, because for example, we'll just use your example of you being the Dragoness or whatever. If you know your audience, which it sounds like you do, if you know your audience and you see something is not a good fit, then you should say something, right?
Right.
So I feel very strongly about that. I'm like, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. I mean, a sale's a sale, a deal's a deal, but if a deal's not right, a deal's not right. And so, if it's not a good fit, then it's not a good fit. But there's also a way to be professional, which separates people from being an amateur. Like when we were talking about being self-published or small print publishing or whatever, you can be professional and have zero. Yeah, you can have zero. You can have like zero exposure. You can be professional. That to me, that's the difference between an amateur is a level of professionalism. An amateur is a person that they're a student, they're learning, they're new. A professional is someone who is constantly trying to improve their craft. And that part of that is you're working relationships with people that are in your industry. So I'm open to editorial good edits. I'm open to good edits.
Okay.
I think the difference is that when you're writing for a newspaper and you're writing in a journalistic piece, there's a sort of there's rules, right? And so if the editor is sticking with those rules, and it's not like, everybody has their own voice and their own signature of how they write. So most of the time they're going to keep that voice, so it doesn't really look like they've encroached on it.
Yeah.
But there's sort of rules, and it's like they do follow a format and a formula. And while creative writing does too, slight changes can change an author's voice. And then, for example, a lot of people will say, hey, this author looks a lot different, and they don't have a ghostwriter, they just have a different editor. And you start to realize that there's a change in their voice, and it's not growth, right? It's not like, oh, they just grown. Like everybody's got a signature. everything. When you sign your name, you may change it a little bit, but it's still like you could tell those are your A's, those are your I's. That's how you dot them, and that's how you cross your T's. Like you have a certain signature like that with art or writing in general. And so when somebody makes a change that isn't you without that in mind, it's blaring. It's blaring on the page, jumps right off at you, and you're like, wait a minute. It's like if you change the font mid-article.
Yeah.
They know that.
Yeah.
So to do that to somebody is taking liberties beyond your paycheck. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't do that with, and especially if you're not going to talk to the author first. Like, hey, look, we need to change this a little bit. Can you go back and do this? We're on a time crunch, so here's your deadline. I need you to go back and change this, and then discuss it. Here's why we're asking you to do that, because our job is also to teach. You know, if you're not going to teach the author, then they're going to continue to make the same mistake that you don't like, and so it's wasting everybody's time. But that's a huge faux pas. Huge.
Oh yeah, I've never asked an author to change their voice. I will never ask an author to change their voice. Now there have been some times where I'm like, hey, what do you think about this or whatever, but I don't do developmental editing like that. I'm more of like, hey, Lisa, you got this story, let's hear your story. Or hey, Donelle, you know, let's see your, because I think the biggest thing for all of us with wanting to be entertained, which that's what the point of, you know, this is, you know, it's a form of entertainment for us. We want something that's familiar, but we want something that's new. We want to see like, hey, why is House of Stitch different than the next magazine that's out there talking with authors or interviewing, you know, people? What makes it different, right? And why should I why should I check that out? Well, it's because the staff, or it's because of the cover, or it's because of, you know, the different elements that come together to make that. And that's the same thing with the production of a book or a magazine or an article for a newspaper, or, you know, like even us doing the radio show. I mean, like, you know, let's be real. Lisa, if you had a bad time the first time around, or if like you and I like had some kind of conflict or something like that, you know, would you have been open to doing the show again?
No.
I mean, we don't have enough time in the day. I don't have enough time in the day to deal with, you know, that kind of stuff. And I don't think anybody wants that kind of stuff. So, you know, when we're looking for entertainment, you know, and I keep seeing this over and over again, but one of the reasons why people watch the same show over and over and over again is because it's familiar and they have comfort with it. It's like, you know, it's like comfort food for your mind and, you know, for your soul. You know, and I feel like that's the same thing with like when people like certain genres are like, oh man, like I was talking to a guy the other day. He said that his favorite holiday is Christmas, and he loves those funny Christmas movies. You know, I wouldn't say to him, hey man, you know, have you seen the new Friday the 13th movie coming up? Right. It wouldn't be a good fit. You know?
No.
So I think that going back to Donelle with your question about, you know, how open am I to editing or whatever, I am very open to editing because I feel like, but I'm not open to micromanaging, nitpicking editing. I'm going to tell you that right off the bat.
No.
But I'm open to anything that's going to help me improve as an author and as a writer, you know, because also, like, for example, let's just say that, you know, we're working together and you're like, hey, you know, this is something that, you know, that we expect and yada, yada, yada. Then I'm going to be able to use that skill set for future writing. Right. You know, and it just always, when everybody's like, for example, with the magazine or this radio show, when everybody's working on the same thing, like, hey, this is all for the reader, this is all for the listener. You know, like everything I do on this show is for my listener. You know, I'm talking to people that I like talking with because I feel like that the listener is going to want to hear what they're talking about or what I'm talking about, you know? And
you have to make a connection no matter what you do. I mean, if there's no connection, then you're just talking to yourself.
Well, like Lisa, you and I, we talked for like an hour before the show. You remember? We were just talking on the phone for like an hour, just getting to know each other. And, you know, so I feel like that, Donelle, kind of going back to what you're talking about with that, you know, community and being able to connect with people, that is exactly what I do. I love building relationships with people, and, you know,
I like learning people's stories.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we got to do the mid-hour thing, and then, I know last time I was asking, last hour I was asking you a little bit about like the genesis story of the House of Stitched. I want to get into that after the break, and then also Lisa, you and Donelle, I think y'all had a couple of interesting topics that we could cover, and
Sure.
so this last half an hour, I think that'd be really cool.
Okay.
All right, so we'll be back in
This
just about
portion of
30 seconds.
WRUU
Okay.
Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
All right, and here is Sebastian Messer playing live on WRU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. That was awesome, Sebastian. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Man, that was like really good. Thank you. Okay, so Genesis story of House of Stitched. Where and how did it begin?
Oh, so House of Stitch actually is a sister to Stitch Smile Publications. When we started, the entire mission was to help new authors coming in, because coming in, a lot of times you are either afraid to ask or you're not sure if the source of who you're asking is reliable. And so we wanted to compile everything that we had learned in our journey and give it to authors while giving them the experience of going through the process of being a professional author. And that included going through professional edits and developmental storytelling, all in the same boat. Like, so at the same time that they submit and we accept, we're like, okay, this has the potential to be great. You're going to have to work at it. That's anybody. And so giving them the process of what it would be like, whether they go with small press or whether they go with a larger press, to just let them make their choices in their journey. And when COVID hit, we did a lot of self-reflection because authors are very sensitive. They're very sensitive to, almost empathic in what's going on in the world. And so sometimes authors write when they're depressed and sometimes they can't write when they're depressed. So that was affecting a lot of our staff, and we decided to pull back just a little bit and self-evaluate as a company, as a team. And our team is super close. We're all very close friends, which happened after we started working together, which is amazing. So we had attempted to do the magazine a long time ago, but the person that we had in charge of that, our vision collided a little bit. Her vision was a lot different than mine. And I did not want to do another magazine full of short stories. I wanted to do something that actually had served a purpose. And so, and I have this thing about, I want to be unique. So we decided to put it on the shelf for a while because we had so much going on with the publishing house. But when we took that step back, we decided to, lessen our load a little bit and focus on what was important once again. So we started the magazine, we changed it up a little bit. It used to be Stitch Now Publications magazine, now it's House of Stitch magazine. And we said the main focus is that we do not deviate from our vision. And we started in 2016, like towards the end, and opened the doors 2016 January. And through that process, we had a lot of people that were supportive and really saw what we were working at, how much time we put into each author, and how we really wanted to help the community. And so the welcome was very warm to us when we decided to do this, and a lot of support out there. And we thought, okay, we can do this. We got the support. We got, our colleagues are on board. So it gave also an opportunity for our authors to continue to work on what they were doing, talk about what they learned, hit other things that they were interested in. So, for example, like we said, Tommy has a podcast, and Jay Mazer is a former psychologist, and so combining their loves into a magazine and really honing in on what their expertise is was important to us, because it's sort of like when you're, a doctor, you write thesis papers or you write study papers and you become an expert in that field. And that's what I wanted to do for them, and to do it in a cohesive magazine where people can pick it up and say, not only is it enjoyable to read and it's fun to read, but I learned something from it in a way that I didn't realize I was learning until I finished the magazine, right? And all the things that we taught them, sometimes we got a little bit of fight back on, because there are other presses, and we won't name names, but there are other presses that don't do it that way. And sometimes in this industry, you're going to get really bad advice. So, who are we at that point to say this is how it's going to be done, or this is how you should do it? We just decided we've done our part. We've said, this is how we do it. And so now let's take our advice and put it against what other people are going. And then it kind of validated what we were saying. And people were like, oh, they weren't feeding us a line of, poopy. So that's what we did. And we did the first couple issues. And I said, you know what? This is it. This is what we want to do. And I said, let's put more, because I felt like what I wanted was this chock full magazine of so much information that if we do it every season, which we do it every season, they have enough time to absorb what's in there, but it could also almost be used like a study guide if they wanted to, and to open their mind to other things, to try new things, and to really apply what they've learned in the magazine to what they're working on. And that's how it's evolved. It's gone from about 72 pages. Now we're up to about 150 pages. And we go from tattoo artists to filmmakers to musicians to poetry. I have some of the top cosplayers on TikTok that we're going to be featuring, like Primal Darkness will be in our next issue. After that, we'll have, I didn't even announce this yet, but one of the issues, we're going to have Slider Jesus. So if you don't know who that is, you got to check them out. They're super cool.
Heard it here first, y'all.
Yeah, you heard it here first, exclusive. So, that's what we intended to do.
I actually have percolating in my mind my first story pitch. So I'll talk to you off air about it. But it's right in line with everything, and also in line with some stuff that I've done in the past, and I think it'll be really cool. So, but yeah, that's so cool.
Well, one of the things, like Lisa said, is not only are we, like in the last issue, if you haven't gotten it, you need to get it. We have Jay Mazer talking about some of the reasons why people like horror or dark fiction. And we have Jessica Rainey, who gives her insight into, so you want to create and write about a monster. And she kind of guides you through that. So there's that teaching part that Lisa built the foundation of Stitched on. But in addition, the articles like about Josh Mallerman, Jonathan Mayberry, and upcoming winter 2022, Laurel K. Hamilton, it's not about so much their work, it's about who they are, what makes them tick. One of my favorite questions is, so you write horror, but what scares you? And, who inspires them? And what kind of music do they listen to? Death in Texas. But, what kind of
They're
music?
both avoidable.
You really should read the one about with Jonathan Jan's in it, because um, yeah, his kids like to feed his fears.
Hmm.
That's all I'm gonna say
Going into the
on that.
next segue here,
But yeah.
talking about that, going from like the origin story, which I
Mhm.
always think is so cool to, like when you're talking about like you find out their story. That's one of the things I love
Yeah.
is to find out about like, well, how did this happen? Like we were talking about journalism. I've never really talked much about my background and going into journalism, but I thought it was cool because your background in journalism but so one of the things I do like with those topics, some of the pitfalls, avoiding some of the pitfalls. Um, so, and it was funny, y'all, because the last show when Lisa was on, like the next week, she was like, "Oh, some of the stuff we were talking about, like I dealt with all of it this week." And
Yeah.
so yeah, like I take that away, Lisa. Talk about that because I just think it's so apropos and it's so pertinent because we and I say we collectively, the writing community, we deal with a lot of the same common issues over and over and over again. We could do
Yeah.
like a knowledge base on this kind of stuff, right? But I thought it was so crazy and
Yeah.
funny at the same time that you're like, I just dealt with all of this stuff that we just talked about. So
Yeah. So what the first thing is, we have an author that when I put the book onto Amazon, it was perfect. It was beautiful. Everything's great. And now I have to go back and fix it because something in the system after so long, like only certain people, and I don't know why, the formatting is messed up. And so he's gotten a couple of, not so great reviews because after it's uploaded and everybody else read it was fine, suddenly
It's not.
there's changes in Amazon and their platform, and so now there's some issues. So I have to go back and fix that. And then one of the things that we do is we're running a contest right now. So the contest is basically like, hey, you write a short story to the writing prompt that we have, and we let the readers pick it. And then, once they pick it, then, we'll feature you. We'll do an interview, and we'll put your short story in there. And, this is your grand prize, but you also get, $25 because that's what blah, 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 blah. Well, I posted in about 5 different groups, and everybody's like, yeah, that's so awesome, whatever, blah, blah. And then I
Yay.
get one group that kind of tore us apart. And I fell into, and the reason I bring this up is not to bring up toxic stuff, which there's plenty of it. But the reason is that
oh no,
this is
you
so
can
easy.
you can talk about it as long as you don't use cursing. All right, or no
I know.
politics,
So,
no religion,
we won't,
no adult
no,
suggested
it's not
material.
gonna
But,
be
no
that.
but you
politics, no
you can
religion,
talk
no
about
swearing.
like toxicity all you want. That's one of the things that we deal with. There's a lot of jealousy and envy in the industry for some reason or another. I don't understand that because, like, I like the idea of a rising tide lifts all boats because guess what? Just because I like Shaun of the Dead, that doesn't mean I'm not gonna like the next horror comedy. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So, and that might be written by somebody completely different.
What happened was I want to talk about how easy it is, even for somebody with experience and who knows what they're doing, to fall into pitfalls. So, and this is important to have thick skin. So I was answering questions to this thing, and then somebody was answering questions, but they were kind of being a little bit pokey, like
snarky.
Almost kind of like debating me about whether the legalities of it. And then it started more people. It started like, steamrolling and getting bigger and bigger, and other people were joining. And I was trying to stay focused. I'm like, let me be transparent because I think I was about to go into another interview. So like, let me just answer this as quickly as I can. I just gave this long answer, and he was like, yeah, so whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. So I said to the staff, I said, hey, listen, I'm having a little bit of issue with questioning. If you're in there, can you come answer some questions for me? Because I've got to go. Like, I've got to go do this. And you guys can answer for me because you are senior management staff, right? So they go in there and they join the group, and they're like, hey, they're answering very politely. They're like, hey, this is the answer to that question. And then it was, oh, now you brought your posse in to fight for you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, I don't understand why you're angry with me. I'm doing a nice thing. Like, why are you angry at me? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to disengage because I feel like this has, no matter what I say, it's going to be misconstrued. And it just kept escalating and escalating. And I finally was like, you know what? I'm going to delete the post because what I said in there was, I am accountable. If you have an issue with what I'm doing, this is for you guys. the people who want to be interviewed and want to enter the contest. If there's something that I'm not doing that you feel is like, or something I'm doing that you feel is not really ethical, please hold me accountable. I will answer questions if it's not answered, in there, whatever.
Here's my story with that too.
Yeah, I was trying to answer the questions like, oh, that's a great question. So I'd go into my post and I'd fix that. And then somebody else would ask me a good question. Like, okay, I'm going to go in it. So finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to step away graciously. I'm just going to step away and whatever. But this happens whether, like, do not engage. Please do not ever engage. Like, when you get a bad review, leave it alone. The reviews aren't for you. This isn't for me. This is for them. All I wanted was to try and answer the question. So what I did was I just shut up. I took a minute. I took a day or two. And then I went back and I redid the post and I made it nice and clear. And then actually what happened was he started sharing it. He was like, yeah, this is great. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah, it sounds like you encountered a rules lawyer and they were heckling you. I had a similar story when 2016 I started this thing called the Savannah Quill as a convention for writers and authors. Matter of fact, the motto is connecting writers and readers to promote literacy. And I've hosted pre-conventions and I've hosted a bunch of meet and greet author things. And like I was telling you before, I do the Books and Brews to raise funds for the Ronald McDonald Charities. Anyway, long story short, I wanted to put together a magazine featuring interviews with authors and some short stories and some stuff like that. And I opened up a short story contest. And I was like, okay, under 1,000 words, it's a $5 entry fee. There will be a cash prize and an award, yada, yada, yada. Here's the deadline. So we had, I don't know, maybe 5 entries 2 weeks before the deadline. And the judges were like, well, we just don't have enough to pick from. Can you please extend the deadline and whatever? And I was like, okay. So I went out there and I said, hey, we haven't had enough engagement with it. We're going to extend the deadline by another 2 weeks, yada, yada, yada. Well, one of the entrants got so upset.
Oh,
and
no.
Yeah, and they were like, well, you're taking the money and yada, yada, yada. And, and here's this email just reached 1,000 words and blah, blah, just being a nasty Karen kind of person to me. This is before Karen was even a name, like that. And, so I used one of those online contest places where people could, vote or whatever. And it marked the entries with the IP addresses for the voting. And so the same person ended up being the winner. Now, I was impartial. I did not read or judge any of the writing. I had 3 independent judges, and then we also took into account the voting online. But the person that won had 30 votes from the same IP address.
Oh.
But that
is messed up.
Well, that the thing was though that I only gave the online voting 25%. The judges were 75% of the voting, and then the online was like the people's choice type thing. And so the person actually won, and I had not even read their story. I didn't tell the judges about any of the drama that was going on. I had nothing to do with, I didn't want to have any kind of influence on the judges whatsoever. I could have disqualified the person completely, but we only had, so many entries. It was like less than 20. And so I didn't want to influence that or whatever. So I ended up having to go to this little group meeting with these people. And there were 3 people in that room that had all made entries, and they were upset that they lost their $5. 2 of them. The other person was really happy because they won, but they were just like, as soon as I got there, they started just being nasty to me and grilling me and just saying that like I was unethical because I changed the rules and I changed the deadline, and it just so nasty to me, right? And about this contest where I think we might have raised 5 times 20, what's it, $100? We might have raised $100, and I ended up giving the first prize. It was like, I think $100 or $50, something like that. And I ended up actually spending money out of my own pocket for like this stuff. And so I let them, say whatever they were going to say. Da, 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 da. I didn't say anything to them. I said, everything was public. It was all online. I said, but I will let you know that the person who won that the contest marked the IP address and it recorded the IP address for every vote. I said, so there was a person here in this room that they had 30 votes from the same IP address. So just give me a heads up. I said, but that wasn't the deciding factor of who won the contest. It was the 3 impartial judges who had no idea of any of the stuff was going on. And that dish of humble pie that I served hot and fresh to their plate just shut them up. Shut them up. And I did it in a professional manner. I wasn't nasty or mean. I didn't take their verbal abuse. I didn't take, I just sat there quietly. I didn't respond to them. And then when it was my turn to talk, I just laid it out for them. And they had nothing to say. Nothing to say.
Yeah.
I have never hosted another contest since because of how toxic and nasty those people were. And their writing was mediocre at best, in my opinion. Mediocre at best.
And that's the problem that I feel like I try to do contests every once in a while just because people do like to compete.
Right.
And there used to be a lot of fun with it. Like, we'd have like these large, writing groups, and then we'd, do a contest of like flash fiction or something. And, it was fun. Like everybody would be congratulating you and, it's fair, it's whatever. And, nowadays it's like there's always, what are you up to? It's like, I'm really trying to do something nice for you guys. I mean, I could put anybody in my magazine. I'm putting you up against, Laurel K. Hamilton. I'm putting you against Josh Mellerman and, Jonathan Mayberry, and I'm putting you in the same magazine with them. What does it gain me? You think it gives me a whole lot of money. If you think I'm making money hand over fist, like I wish that was the case. But the other thing is, they're like, then they were attacking like, well, your price point, no, you're not going to get that much exposure. And I'm like,
are you kidding me?
My price point, I was like, first of all, my price point is $5.
I mean,
for
all 5 of my listeners are listening today.
Yeah, and I'm like, but not. But I was like, the other price point for the magazine, you're getting 150 pages of articles and teaching and all this. It's more of a coffee table style.
Yeah.
It's high level. Pictures and everything.
Yeah.
I told my mom. Even my mom commented on the price. I love you, Mom. If you ever hear this, I do value your opinion and I love you. But she even pointed out that it seemed a little high for the physical copy until I explained to her that this last issue that came out in this month, August, is 152 pages. And it is chock full of articles and artwork and color and black and white and grayscale. I mean, it's page cover to cover. It's gorgeous. Lisa designs the best cover ever. I can't design nearly as good on a graphics. I've got to cut you off there, Donelle. I'm sorry. We've got to wrap the hour up. I do want to share this last little thing talking about the same thing. I've got a couple of books of poetry that I published, and I charged $10 for the paperback. There are 25 poems in the book, so it's a very thin. It's like a little chapter book. Okay, I charged $10, and I had a person one time make a comment to me about the book only having 25 poems, and it was $10, and that was kind of expensive. I said, you could look at it that way. $10, you might feel like that's expensive. I said, but for $10, I said, you can't buy the kind of emotions that you're going to feel after you read this. And the guy kind of looked at me like, what? So, this is the way I look at it. People who get what you're doing and they value what you're doing, they'll happily pay the price point. The folks that feel like either one, they can't do it themselves, or two, they're just miserly, they're going to try to penny pinch and say, why are you charging this much, or why are you trying to, like, you're not my audience. You're not the person that gets this. You're not the person I'm trying to sell this book to. So thank you for your input, but no thank you. So last but not least, where can people check out information about the House of Stitch magazine and your own websites?
So my website is, my personal website is unsaintly.com. The magazine is houseofstitch.com. You can also go to stitchedsmilepublications.com. Any social media that you go to, we have House of Stitched or Stitch Smile publications. So somewhere in the either world of the internet, we are under those names. And then, of course, all of our staff members are on House of Stitch page, so you can find them as well. And Donelle has a TikTok. I have a TikTok. Mine is Unsaintly. And yours is what, Donelle?
At the moment, it is DP Whiting, I think, underscore Pardee time. Search Pardee time and you'll find it.
It's a fun Donelle on TikTok, and then we have the House of Stitched on TikTok as well. And
the reason I don't know is because I changed it, and now I'm going to change it again.
Well, that's cool. So that's what life's all about, is change, and good change. So thank you, ladies, so much for being
under construction.
That's cool.
So,
well, thank you, ladies, so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you
for having us.